The Resident Evil series is built on some of the most dangerous viruses ever created, and in this video, we will cover them all. From those that wiped entire cities off the map, to others that gave birth to some of the most terrifying bioweapons, and all the way to some that would turn ordinary people into monsters. Here is every single Resident Evil virus explained. Long before the name Umbrella ever existed, before Raccoon City, and before the age of bioorganic weapons, there was a discovery that would change the course of human history forever, and that was the Progenitor virus. The origins of Progenitor trace back thousands of years to ancient Africa, where a rare species of flower carried a primordial retrovirus unlike anything seen in modern science. This virus possessed a terrifying trait, the ability to rewrite genetic code at a cellular level. In most humans, infection meant rapid mutation, cellular breakdown, and death. But in extremely rare cases, a host could survive, and those survivors displayed extraordinary vitality, strength, and slowed aging. To ancient civilizations like the Napaya tribe, these survivors were seen as gods. Fast forward to 1966, when three men, Oswald E. Spencer, James Marcus, and Edward Ashford, rediscovered this virus. To them, Progenitor represented more than a scientific curiosity. It was the key to human evolution and possibly immortality. Spencer in particular became obsessed, believing humanity could be reshaped into a race of superior beings under his guidance. The problem was control. Progenitor was too lethal and too unstable. Nearly every subject died. So, Umbrella's earliest research focused on weakening and modifying the virus into something more manageable. This pursuit led directly to the creation of the T Virus, the foundation of nearly every major outbreak in the Resident Evil series. Created in the late 1970s by James Marcus, the T virus was born from combining the Progenitor virus with leech DNA in an attempt to stabilize its deadly effects. The goal wasn't just survival, it was control. Umbrella wanted a virus that could enhance living organisms into weapons. Unlike Progenitor, the T virus was more predictable, but it came with horrifying trade-offs. In humans, it attacked the brain's higher functions, causing necrosis in the cerebral cortex. Memory, reasoning, and personality all eroded away, replaced by aggression and a ravenous hunger. The result was the iconic zombie, not truly dead, but biologically rewritten and trapped in a near comatose state. But zombies were only the beginning. The virus dramatically increased muscle mass, reduced pain response, and boosted durability. In animals and insects, it produced giant hyper-aggressive mutations. And with enough experimentation, Umbrella researchers like William Birkin used T-virus strains to create purpose-built BOWs such as Hunters, Lickers, and eventually the Tyrants, super soldier prototypes designed for combat. The T-virus could spread through bites, contaminated water, air particles, and even plants or insects. A single leak was enough to doom entire cities. And tragically, that is exactly what happened in Raccoon City, where an outbreak exposed the world to Umbrella's crimes and marked the beginning of the bioterror era. Ironically, the virus also showed limited medical promise. Small controlled doses were once researched for cancer treatment, but the instability always won out. In the grand story of Resident Evil, the T virus is its catalyst. It's the reason STARS was deployed, the cause of Raccoon City's destruction, and the foundation for nearly every later strain. It proved Umbrella could weaponize life itself, and once that line was crossed, there was no going back. While Umbrella's main branch pursued the T virus, another powerful family within the company had its own ambitions. The Ashfords, one of Umbrella's founding houses, wanted to surpass Oswald Spencer's work and reclaim their influence. That ambition gave rise to the T Veronica virus, created in the early 1980s by the child prodigy Alexia Ashford. Unlike the T virus, which focused on raw mutation and weaponization, T Veronica was built around a strange discovery. Alexia found traces of an ancient virus within the genes of a queen ant and became fascinated by ant colony hierarchy. She believed a single superior being could rule absolutely, just as a queen controls her hive, and that philosophy would go on to shape the virus's design. T. Veronica combined the Progenitor virus with this ancient ant virus and plant genes. The result was a strain that didn't just mutate hosts, it aimed to create a master-slave ecosystem. Lower-level infected would instinctively obey a dominant host, creating built-in biological control. But T. Veronica was extremely aggressive. In most hosts, it destroyed the brain too quickly, making them unstable as BOWs. True compatibility required slow adaptation, so Alexia herself would go on to achieve this by placing her body in a cryogenic sleep for 15 years, allowing the virus to bond gradually. Once she awoke, she had retained her intelligence, gained immersive regenerative power, and even developed incendiary blood that could ignite on contact with the air. The virus also produced insect-like and plant-based mutations, hardened carapaces, and extreme survivability. In theory, a successful host could become functionally immortal. Narratively, T. Veronica represents Umbrella's aristocratic side, less about mass weapons and more about creating a superior ruling being. It would also set the stage for later viruses that would emphasize control and hierarchy. If the T virus was about creating weapons, the G virus was about creating evolution itself. This virus was discovered in 1988 by William Birkin during his experiments on Lisa Trevor, a long-term progenitor test subject whose body had developed abnormal resilience. When a prototype parasite was implanted in her, Birkin observed a completely new viral structure inside her cells, the earliest form of what he would call the G virus. Unlike the T virus, which mutates a host into a single monstrous form, the G virus forces constant evolution. It rewrites the body again and again, adapting to injury and stress. A G-infected host develops immense strength and dramatic physical changes, most famously the giant eye that appears on the shoulder of advanced forms. But the real difference is reproduction. G doesn't spread through bites or air. Instead, it reproduces by implanting embryos into other hosts. If the genetics are compatible, a new G creature is born. If not, the embryo violently rejects the host, often bursting out and killing them. The virus instinctively seeks close genetic relatives for higher success rates. Birkin eventually became obsessed with his creation. When Umbrella tried to cease his research in 1998, he injected himself with the unfinished virus. Rather than becoming a perfect G-human, he transformed into a rapidly mutating monster driven by instinct. The only near success story was Sherry Birkin, who had received a vaccine that halted full mutation but left her with regenerative abilities. In the timeline of Resident Evil, the G virus represented unchecked scientific ambition. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a new form of life, and once it began evolving, even its creator couldn't control it. By the late 1980s, Umbrella had a serious problem. Their T-virus BOWs were powerful, but they were also kinda stupid. The virus damaged the brain, making most creatures too unpredictable to follow complex orders. For Umbrella's European branch, this was just unacceptable. A weapon that couldn't be controlled wasn't profitable, and their solution wasn't a new virus, but a parasite instead. This became the Nemesis Project, an initiative to create a secondary brain that could override the intelligence loss created by the T-virus. The result was the NE-alpha parasite, an artificial organism designed purely for cognition and control. On its own, the parasite was useless, but once implanted into a host's nervous system, it could link to the brain and take over higher functions. At first, early prototypes failed. The parasite was just too aggressive and killed hosts within minutes. But after nearly a decade of refinement, Umbrella Europe achieved a stable version. The finished NE-alpha parasite was implanted into a mass-produced tyrant, creating the Nemesis T-type, a BOW that could follow orders, track targets, use weapons, and even make tactical decisions. Unlike the mindless tyrants before, Nemesis could pursue a mission with relentless focus. Its famous directive to eliminate STARS members during the Raccoon City incident showed just how precise it could be. The parasite also boosted regeneration and could transmit T-virus strains through its tentacles, making Nemesis even deadlier over time. In the broader story, the Nemesis Project marked Umbrella's shift towards smarter bioweapons. It proved BOWs didn't have to be mindless monsters, but instead, they could be controlled hunters. It also revealed a sinister truth, that the closer Umbrella came to intelligent weapons, the closer they came to creating something they might not be able to command forever. After the chaos of the late 1990s, Umbrella researchers were still chasing the same dream, a bioweapon that combined strength, durability, and intelligence without the usual drawbacks. The T Virus created powerful monsters, but rotted the body. The G Virus offered evolution and regeneration, but was wildly unstable. So Umbrella Europe attempted something bold. They tried to combine the two. This led to the experimental T plus G virus in the early 2000s. The idea was to use the T virus as a stabling base, while selectively incorporating genetic components of the G virus. Instead of letting G's runaway mutations take over, researchers removed its most unpredictable traits and kept regenerative and adaptive qualities. In theory, this would produce a controlled super soldier. One of the most unusual goals of the T plus G project involved bioelectromagnetics. Scientists experimented with amplifying the body's natural electrical signals to create a high-voltage electromagnetic field around the host. This field could potentially deflect bullets and resist conventional weapons, turning the host into a walking shield. Early prototypes were failures. The first version produced only weak currents and caused severe skin damage and mental collapse. Later versions improved, and some test subjects could briefly generate powerful electrical discharges. However, there was a fatal flaw. Once the host was injured beyond a certain point, the stabilizing T virus influence weakened, and the G virus traits erupted uncontrollably. This triggered extreme mutation and total loss of control. The project was reportedly nearing demonstration when it was stolen during a terrorist incident, and after that, development quietly disappeared and Umbrella completely abandoned it. Long before modern bioengineering, the world of Resident Evil was already harboring a different kind of threat, one that wasn't a virus at all. Las Plagas, meaning the plagues in Spanish, are ancient parasitic organisms believed to be thousands, possibly millions of years old. Unlike viral agents that rewrite cells, Plagas are living parasites that attach to the host's nervous system and directly control their body. Their first known discovery in modern times occurred in a rural region of Spain, where a cult known as Los Illuminados unearthed fossilized Plaga remains beneath a castle. Once revived, the parasites quickly proved they could dominate a host's mind while leaving much of their intelligence intact. This was a revolutionary trait compared to T-virus zombies, which were largely mindless. Hosts infected with a standard subordinate Plaga could speak, use tools, coordinate attacks, and even maintain daily routines. But their loyalty was absolute. They were no longer individuals, only extensions of the parasite's will, and this made them ideal for organized control. The real breakthrough came when researcher Luis Serra engineered the dominant or control Plaga. These superior specimens allowed certain hosts to retain full intelligence and even control other infected. This created a hierarchy, turning the Plaga into a system of biological mind control. This parasite would become central to the events of Resident Evil 4, where Leon S. Kennedy uncovered a global bioterror plot involving Plaga-based domination. In the wider lore, Las Plagas represent a different philosophy of bioweapons. Instead of destroying the mind, they weaponize it. Instead of chaos, they create order. And in some ways, that made them far more dangerous than any other virus. The T-Abyss virus was a specialized offshoot of the T-virus line, created by combining traditional T-virus research with a newly discovered deep-sea pathogen known as the Abyss virus. This original virus was found in fish living over 9,000 meters deep in the Kermadec Trench, where extreme pressure and darkness shaped unusual evolutionary traits. Researchers realized this organism functioned almost like a marine counterpart to the Progenitor virus, enhancing survivability and aggression in hostile environments. Weaponization began when a joint project between the FBC and Tricell sought to adapt the virus for human infection. By splicing it with T-virus genes, scientists enabled cross-species transmission, but this came with violent side effects. Early hosts often suffered tissue collapse because their bodies couldn't handle the rapid mutation rate. Later refinements would slow the infection process, allowing partial adaptation, though grotesque mutations remained common. Victims infected with T. abyss often appeared waterlogged and corpse-like. Their bodies would bloat, skin would discolor, and unnecessary tissue could liquefy or reshape into appendages designed to absorb fluids. Because the virus consumed bodily liquids, many infectees developed a compulsive need to seek out water or blood to sustain themselves. In some rare cases, genetically resistant individuals transformed into creatures known as skagdead, mutating slowly over days or weeks while remaining mentally aware of their fate, making it a particularly disturbing outcome. This virus proved extremely effective in marine life, creating aggressive sea-based bioweapons and even granting creatures camouflage traits similar to deep-sea organisms. Its potential ecological threat was enormous. A large-scale ocean release could theoretically destabilize entire marine ecosystems. The T virus would play a central role in the events aboard the Queen Zenobia during Resident Evil Revelations, where its development data was mostly destroyed. Still, surviving samples ensured that, like many bioweapons in RE4, it was never truly erased. The T abyss virus showed that bioorganic warfare wasn't just limited to land, the oceans could be weaponized too. The Uroboros virus was the culmination of Albert Wesker's ideology and ambition. After inheriting the vision of Oswald E. Spencer, Wesker no longer sought to simply create weapons, but he wanted to reshape humanity itself. Uroboros was designed as a tool of forced evolution, meant to judge the human race and leave only the genetically superior alive. Unlike earlier viruses that caused unpredictable mutations, Uroboros was engineered with a binary outcome, being adaptation or rejection. There was no middle ground. If a host possessed exceptional genetic compatibility, the virus would integrate into their body, granting superhuman strength, regeneration, and slowed aging. These rare survivors retained their intelligence and gained cat-like yellow-red eyes as a visual hallmark of adaptation. But for the vast majority, the result was horrific. The virus produced black, snake-like pustules that consumed the host from the inside out. Rejected hosts lost all control as their bodies were overtaken by writhing masses of viral tissue that sought out and absorbed organic matter to grow larger. These creatures became nearly immune to conventional firearms, making them devastating bioweapons. A critical weakness, however, was heat. High temperatures could destabilize Uroboros, which is exactly why incineration and specialized laser weapons were considered effective countermeasures. Uroboros also had limited use on corpses. In dead hosts, it could reanimate tissue, but without true regeneration, making these forms weaker than live adapted hosts. This virus is central to the events of Resident Evil 5, where Wesker attempted to launch a global release that would have wiped out most of humanity. His goal was a world populated only by those he deemed worthy. In the broader lore, Uroboros was a virus that wasn't about profit or warfare anymore, but instead, it was about playing executioner for the entire human race. The T Phobos virus was a unique offshoot of the T virus, designed not around physical strength, but around fear itself. Developed by researchers working under Alex Wesker, the virus was engineered to activate in response to a host's psychological stress. Its very name comes from Phobos, the Greek personification of fear, which perfectly reflects how it works. Unlike most viruses in the series that begin mutating the body immediately, T Phobos remains dormant in the bloodstream after infection, and it only activates when the host experiences intense fear or stress. Once adrenaline and noradrenaline spike, the virus immediately reacts, spreading through the body at a rate tied directly to the subject's emotional state. The calmer the mind, the slower the infection. The more panic, the more rapid the mutation. This made T Phobos both a research tool and a cruel experiment. Subjects were monitored with special bracelets that tracked fear levels through color-coded alerts. Green would mean safe, orange signaled activation, and red indicated viral pathogenesis, and flashing red warned that mutation was imminent. In other words, fear became a death sentence. Because the virus was deliberately weakened compared to the base T virus, it didn't immediately destroy higher brain function. This allowed infected individuals to retain speech, reasoning, and motor skills longer than traditional zombies. Some rare individuals with exceptional mental control could even surpass the virus long enough for their immune systems to develop antibodies, effectively resisting the mutation. In certain cases, hosts who psychologically conquered their fear didn't just survive, they adapted. These individuals could gain enhanced physical abilities, echoing the prototype virus that empowered Albert Wesker. Red glowing eyes upon revival were a known sign of this adaptation. This virus plays a major role in Resident Evil Revelations 2, and more than any other virus, T Phobos proves that in Resident Evil, fear itself can be the true bioweapon. The C virus represents one of the most advanced and chaotic viral weapons in the Resident Evil timeline. Created by Carla Radames under the direction of Derek Simmons and the secret organization known as the Family, its purpose was simple: produce highly controllable bioorganic weapons and dominate the global BOW market. Unlike earlier strains, the C virus was completely artificial. It was engineered by combining elements of the G virus and the refined T Veronica strain, while also extracting the famous DNA mutation attribute, originally traced back to Progenitor research. The result was a virus capable of extreme regeneration, rapid mutation, and most importantly, preserved intelligence. Once directly injected, the C virus typically transforms humans into Juavo, which were intelligent BOWs that can use weapons, communicate, and coordinate tactically. But the real horror appears when they take enough damage, because at that point, the virus triggers a chrysalis stage, encasing the host in a cocoon where the body is dissolved and rebuilt into a complete mutation species. These forms vary widely, often reflecting added animal DNA or environmental adaptation. Another dangerous feature is its airborne strain, which creates fast-acting zombie outbreaks. Unlike T-virus zombies, these infected can retain fragments of memory and basic tool use. However, the C-virus was intentionally designed with minimal secondary transmission. Bites don't spread it easily, meaning outbreaks could be controlled and weaponized more strategically. The virus reached its peak during the events of Resident Evil 6, where global bioterror incidents showed just how adaptable and devastating it could be. Carla later enhanced the strain using the blood of Jake Mueller, allowing near limitless mutation while preserving intelligence, making it a terrifying evolution of viral warfare. The A virus, often called the Animality virus, was a highly strategic bioweapon designed around one revolutionary idea: being control. Unlike earlier viruses that turned victims into indiscriminate monsters, the A virus allowed its creators to decide who the infected would attack and who they would ignore. The project was led by bioterrorist Glenn Arias, who sought to create a virus that reflected his belief that human society needed to be stripped down to its primal instincts. To achieve this, he incorporated genetic material derived from Las Plagas, specifically nucleotide markers from the dominant strain. These markers acted like a biological identification system. The A virus actually consists of three components working together. The first component, known as latent, is a dominant strain spread through food and water. It infects nearly everyone exposed but causes no symptoms on its own. The second component, known as trigger, activates the latent strain, rapidly turning hosts into zombies. And the third component, known as vaccine, is the key to control. Those vaccinated carry a Plaga-based genetic marker that tells infected zombies not to attack them. This meant soldiers or VIPs could be vaccinated and safely move among the infected. In theory, armies of zombies could be deployed without friendly fire, making it a massive leap into bioweapon control. A-virus zombies still suffer necrosis like traditional T-virus victims, but they retain surprising levels of awareness. Some can speak simple words, recognize names, and coordinate in groups. They also avoid attacking other infected, eliminating cannibalistic behavior seen in earlier outbreaks. The virus appears in the CG film Resident Evil Vendetta, where its strategic potential is fully demonstrated. Unlike chaotic outbreaks like Raccoon City, the A virus was designed for precision bioterrorism. The so-called Kodoku virus is an unofficial term used to describe a brutal experimental pathogen developed under Alex Wesker during her time on Sonido de Tortuga Island. While Spencer's official directive was to pursue immortality research rooted in progenitor concepts, Alex had her own agenda, being that she was after creating the ultimate intelligent bioweapon. The project's philosophy was inspired by the Japanese folklore ritual Kodoku, where multiple venomous creatures are sealed together until only one survives, the victor becoming a powerful charm or curse. Alex applied this idea biologically. Thousands of human test subjects were infected and forced into deadly combat trials, and after each round, researchers extracted viral material from the sole survivor and used it to infect the next group. Over repeated cycles, the virus essentially evolved through survival of the fittest. Rather than a single clean strain, the Kodoku virus became a recombinant lineage shaped by constant selection pressure. Each generation carried genetic traits from the most successful hosts, and the result was a pathogen that preserved higher intelligence, memory retention, and command recognition compared to standard T-virus derivatives. When Alex later abandoned the island as part of her betrayal of Oswald E. Spencer, researcher Dirk Miller continued the trials using local villagers as test subjects. But without proper oversight, many BOWs escaped, and some even retained fragments of their human identities. One subject attempted to rebuild a primitive community, showing how unusually intact their cognition remained. By the project's end, the final strain reportedly limited necrosis in the cerebral cortex, the very flaw that plagued most T-virus weapons. This allowed infected subjects to follow commands, recall memories, and even attempt basic communication. The Mutamycete, most commonly called the mold, represents one of the most unique biohazards in Resident Evil because it isn't a virus or parasite. It's a fungal superorganism. Classified as a Mutamycete fungus, it functions as a vast network of mycelium, capable of storing genetic information, influencing the mind, and restructuring living tissue at a cellular level. The mold first came into the hands of the crime syndicate The Connections in the late 1990s. Their initial goal was to engineer a controllable human bioweapon using the mold's psychotropic and regenerative properties. Instead of traditional infection, the mold spreads through fungal cells that infiltrate the body and gradually replace organic tissue. Their breakthrough came with the creation of the E-series, particularly Evelyn. Unlike earlier test subjects, Evelyn could naturally produce and control mold. She used chemical signaling similar to bacterial quorum sensing to influence the thoughts and behaviors of those she infected. Victims experienced hallucinations of Evelyn and slowly lost their sense of self, eventually becoming loyal to her, quote, family. In early stages, infected hosts gain extreme regeneration, even reattaching severed limbs. As infection spreads to the brain, psychological control deepens, and in the final stage, the body mutates into monstrous forms or becomes part of the mold network itself. Evelyn could also use spawn creatures known as molded, which were humanoid beings formed entirely from fungal mass. The events of Resident Evil 7 show how devastating this organism can be. The Baker family, once normal people, were mentally and physically warped under Evelyn's influence. Unlike prior outbreaks, this wasn't about chaos. It was about domination and control. Countermeasures did exist, including serums and specialized anti-regen ammunition, but treatment windows were extremely small. Once the mold fully integrates with the host, removing it is often fatal. The Megamycete is the ancient fungal superorganism that serves as the true source of the mold seen in later entries. Unlike the lab-engineered Mutamycete from Resident Evil 7, the Megamycete is a naturally occurring fungal network that grew deep beneath a remote Eastern European village for centuries, absorbing the memories and biological data of those who died nearby. In many ways, it functions like a living archive of consciousness. Its discovery changed everything when Mother Miranda came into contact with it in the early 20th century. Upon infection, Miranda gained enhanced longevity, regeneration, and the ability to interface with the Megamycete's stored memories, including those of her deceased daughter Eva. Convinced the organism could resurrect her child, Miranda devoted her life to mastering its properties. This research eventually led to the creation of the Kodoku parasite, which were nematodes infected with mold that acted as delivery vessels. The Kodoku allowed more controlled infections by distributing mold through a host's body like a parasite. Successful hosts retain intelligence and autonomy, while failures devolved into lichens or other monsters. Select individuals such as Alcina Dimitrescu, Carl Heisenberg, Donna Beneviento, and Salvatore Moreau showed higher compatibility, becoming Miranda's lords. Each displayed unique mutations based on their biology and psychology, providing the mold's adaptability. The central conflict of Resident Evil 8 revolves around Miranda's attempt to use Rosemary Winters as a perfect vessel to revive Eva. However, her ritual fails, revealing that while the Megamycete can preserve memories, true resurrection is another matter. The Megamycete's destruction at the end of Village seemingly erased the central fungal mass, but its prior spread, including samples given to outside groups, suggests its legacy may not be fully gone. The Mutated T Virus strain is an advanced evolution of the original T Virus seen in past entries that would be discovered by scientist Victor Gideon after the collapse of Umbrella in 2003. After digging through Umbrella founder Oswald E. Spencer's research, Victor learned of the virus's ability to control a host's memory and will. This resulted in anyone infected with the mutated strain to retain their pre-infection habits and characteristics, but would now carry them out in a much more intense and aggressive way. This was perfectly displayed when Victor deliberately infected his entire hospital called the Rhodes Hill Chronic Care Center, as we could see an infected maid who continued her cleaning duties by aggressively scrubbing the bathroom mirrors while repeatedly smashing her head into them, leaving glass shards embedded throughout her face. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the chef would still prepare food, methodically chopping fresh meat with intense aggression, eventually leaving his entire workstation covered in blood splattered across the walls. Also, the infected singers would roam the halls while dancing and screaming in a very unsettling demeanor. Through further digging into Spencer's research, Victor was also able to learn of the virus's potential memory transfer capabilities, but the success rate was low as hosts must be able to withstand the toxicity of the mutated T virus strain while preserving their own intelligence. Pretty much every enemy in Resident Evil 9 was not a viable host and would ultimately succumb to the toxicity, resulting in some of the most unsettling mutated creatures seen in the series. Aside from this, Victor also learned of a horrifying lethal disease tied to the original T virus, which he referred to as Raccoon City Syndrome. This results from a latent strain of the T virus remaining inside the bodies of survivors from the Raccoon City outbreak. During the dormant stage, antibodies kept the virus suppressed, but over time, the virus gradually evolved, adapting to the host's immune system until it could bypass those defenses entirely. And once activated, those effects were devastating. Black bruise-like marks would appear on the skin, and victims would begin experiencing fatigue, coughing, and general weakness. During stage 2, or the development stage, the marks spread across the body and begin affecting internal organs. Numbness spreads through infected areas, and many patients begin vomiting blood as internal damage worsens. By stage 3, the terminal stage, the infection consumes the entire body. The marks darken, severe pain sets in, and movement becomes nearly impossible. Victims suffer vomiting blood before ultimately dying within 1 to 2 hours. Unlike most T-virus infections, victims of Raccoon City Syndrome do not reanimate after death, making it a rare deviation from traditional viral behavior. But despite its extreme lethality, the disease was still vulnerable to Elpis, an antiviral agent derived from Progenitor research. Even individuals in the final stage of infection could be cured with this. Regardless, the existence of Raccoon City Syndrome revealed a terrifying truth, that even decades after the destruction of Raccoon City, the T-virus was still evolving into something far worse. Click this video here to learn about the twisted story of Resident Evil 9's main villain, Victor Gideon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.